How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me, Sarah.
Good. Welcome to the Caffe Lena stage, and welcome to the Art of Community, which is a program that puts on this stage executive directors of the incredible nonprofits that exist here in our town of Saratoga Springs. And instead of talking specifically about, like what your mission is as an organization, I'm really interested in how you lead your organization, because I have this idea that whether you're in the arts or whether you're in social services or social justice, a lot of us have the same motivations, and we can learn a lot from each other. So Andy Gilpin, you are the executive director of Captain Community Human Services.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes.
Great. So first of all, let's just step back and get a piece of information into the conversation, which is essentially, what is your organization addressing?
Sure. Thank you. So Captain's been around for 45 years, and that'll be this year. We're celebrating 45. And we are really focused on addressing some of the core social issues that face our community all around Saratoga County and even some of the capital region, really focused on food insecurity, economic crisis, homelessness, and creating structure that we have programs that take people from crisis to sustainability. So really working on some power-based program, community support program, just really having a host of services that people can enter at any point, and a continuum they can continue on to sustainability and a success that they feel is best for them and a different future story. So
that's really interesting. It's probably the case, I would imagine, that it's hard to have just one problem and not have more than one problem. Is that where the multiplicity comes from?
Exactly. There's, everybody's lives involve so many different things, and there's a lot of complexities to an individual. And if we can address several of those in one place with a caring environment and great staff and volunteers, hopefully they feel comfortable to stay with us to move through that process for themselves.
I think when I think of Captain, for some reason, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you have a lot of programs for kids, but but it's not primarily for children?
Yeah, that's a lot of our foundation where we started. It used to be Captain Youth and Family Services, and we were really focused on youth and families. So a lot of our programs centered on youth development, youth homelessness, other factors like that. But we had a merger in 2018 with Burnt Hills Balsam Lake Community Human Services. And the coming together of those two organizations really expanded and broadened our scope of service. So now we do everything from children to senior citizens and everybody in between.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So let me step back and just ask you, if you're like me, nobody told you about working in nonprofits when you were in high school and you were going to the career fair and stuff like that. I mean, the closest that I could come up with to the kind of impact that I wanted to have in the world was to become a nun. And I really didn't like aspects of that. And so I think if somebody had told me about nonprofits, I would have been fascinated. But when did you discover this type of work, and how did you get into it?
Yeah, I think you explained it very well. The trajectory for nonprofit leaders is usually a kind of a winding road, and there isn't a roadmap all the time for folks. I became exposed to it in a couple different ways. One, through college, I was political science background, and that's what I graduated with. And I did an internship with the U.S. Conference of Mayors in D.C. So I got to see a bit of the federal government and how that operates, but more importantly, connection with local government and how they were dealing with local issues. So I wasn't attracted to the federal side of things, but more of local effort. And then my first professional career was with a nonprofit. So I got to see that side of how impact sector made a difference and supported community or supported clients or worked with in the community in a different way than government does. So that really attracted me and started to get my wheels turning, and really thought that I would like to stay within the nonprofit sector. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about the intersection between nonprofits in a community and the local government. Is there enough of a voice for nonprofits in civic discussion? Do we get enough support from the government? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a mixed bag. In some ways, they are very supportive, and it feels nonprofits and impactor sectors, I believe, fill a role for sure within the community. That many of the governmental programs are more safety net focused and really for extreme situations wherein there is a sector of the population that are really struggling but don't meet those income qualifications or eligibility or things like that, but are still need support in a variety of ways, right? So the impact sector has room to step in and be a presence and really contribute and help a community stay whole in many different ways. And so I think that government does support us. They also create barriers sometimes to that application of services. And I do feel that there is room for increased investment because impact sector has shown tremendous results. And it really shows effectiveness, collaboration, and just positive outcomes in so many different ways that investment in that sector and the people would make a big difference.
It's impossible to imagine how our communities could function without the work that the impact sector does.
Yeah, and they many times quietly do that in the background a lot of the times, and people don't realize until they're either one, know somebody's in need or they're in need, or do become introduced in some way and see the broad scope of what the impact sector does.
Yeah. Boy, I just want to chase after so many questions that I have there about like funding and stuff like that. But I'm gonna back off of that for a moment and just ask you. So, what was your first job in the nonprofit sector?
So I worked at a residential program for youth, and it was all adjudicated youth. And so I started out as a counselor and worked with clients on an individual basis, doing counseling and, work on treatment goals, things like that. And then I started working my way through that organization to be a treatment supervisor with that. Yeah.
So, but then your background was political science. How did you learn to do that work? They just had a program and you learned how to do it?
Yeah, basically. A lot of good on-the-job training, a lot of good mentorship, supervision, and understanding, what the program structure was about. So they did a lot of great stuff with that.
Yeah. That's some of my most, exciting and fun times in nonprofits have been going off to conferences and stuff and taking all of the workshops and just, everything that you learn has such direct application to the knowledge that you need to have. It's not like being in school where you have to taste this and taste that and maybe some of it's your thing and some of it's not. But once you get into the workforce like that, you're just so hungry for information. So, but now you're the executive director of a very large organization. What's it like being the executive director as opposed to being, one of the other people in administration?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely different. So I'm only in my, year and about 4 months right now. So I'm still learning. I feel like I'm still learning. So I'm not sure if I have expert advice on any of this, but I had the real benefit of joining Captain. So I've been there for almost 11 years. In the 10 years that I was there prior to this position, I entered at the youth shelter and then worked my way through the organization. So I got to see all aspects, and I was the associate executive director for many, many years of that. Had a wonderful leader with Sue Katropa, our former executive director. She introduced me to just a lot of the leadership, a lot of what it takes to run an organization, helped me make connections in the community, gave me the freedom to be a part of a lot of different groups. So I really felt that I had just amazing mentorship with her to help me get to the position where I feel comfortable with being the executive director. But it really is about sort of pulling out of the daily operations and really, so easy to kind of fall back default to the program service delivery and say, okay, yes, let's work with that client. Here's what we do. When the executive director really needs to be more of the global vision. What's the mission? What's our strategic plan? Fiscal health of the organization, sustainability, our human capital, like how are we meeting the needs of the organization? And are we staying focused on what the needs of the community really are to show that, good impact and outcome. So, you know,
Yeah.
not doing the individual work on the trees, but see the whole forest.
That's really true. And, I don't mean this in any way to sound, this sounds a little bit weird, but it's like each employee that you have is like one of your tools for getting the work done. And you need to learn the the personality, the strengths, the weaknesses, the everything, so that you could get the most out of that and have that, be a good fit for the job.
Yeah.
And learning management is just like people go and get master's degrees in that. They get PhDs in that. And so much of, I think, in the nonprofit world, we have to learn it ourselves on the job. So you said that, you were really mentored in some of those skills. Do you have other sources that you go to develop your skills as in management, or the other, like, could be financial management, could be, personnel management, whatever?
Yeah, I try to take advantage of every opportunity that's come my way. So, workshops, conferences, all are, rich grounds for, knowing what I need as a leader and an executive. I still try to continue that mentorship, seek people out within the community that I admire, that I've seen do great work, pick their brains, hopefully, giving me sage wisdom and advice that I can employ. We have an amazing group in Saratoga County, amazing leaders from other nonprofits and impact sector and so many other places. So every time I get in a room, I try to be a sponge and just soak it all up and say, well, I'm going to take, not steal, I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to put that in because that is such an amazing idea. And I think we have a very collaborative approach with things. So we really find ways to support each other as well.
I've really been hearing that from other people in the human services sector, and that is wonderful. And I think the arts world is just starting to catch up with that, and we have a lot more collaboration than we did 5 years ago. And I agree. There's such a spark that happens when you get a bunch of people with the same concerns in the room, able to talk openly.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think that what we have been told as leaders, as executives, is you have to run it like a business, right? Even though it's a nonprofit, you have to run it like a business. Well, your model is the for-profit world, and it's very competitive. It's a very competitive environment, and that's just not a great model for how nonprofits need to work together in, of any form, impact sector, arts, anyone. It has to be more collaborative and supportive because we need each other as a whole, rather than somehow competing against each other. Yeah,
I really agree that that's a fundamental difference. If your ultimate goal is essentially profit, then it's, me and how do I get ahead and how do I accelerate up the ladder and how do I win and beat the other guy. And if your fundamental goal is to put food in people's mouths or to keep a family together or keep a roof over their head, you almost don't care if you're washing the dishes or if you're filing the financial statement or you're, painting a house. It's like you just want to help get that done and you do what needs to be done. And I agree that there needs to be clarity among the different positions. There needs to be a cohesive, sensible structure. And I think that that's something that we can kind of take from the for-profit world. There needs to be financial accountability. There needs to be answerability to our donors and funders, but with a fundamental understanding that this is driven by the heart and values and that the outcomes are sometimes very difficult to quantify.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Would you say that you talked a lot about kind of carrying the overall vision for Captain, and that's where your head needs to be, and then you're trying to make the organization like a machine that can, accomplish that. Is there creativity in your work? Would you consider this to be a creative job?
I think it's probably a little of both. There's definitely system management, and there's definitely certain requirements with funding or other kinds of stuff that you just need to have structure and policy and things. But I think at the overall leadership level, it is, I don't know, lack of a better word, maybe an orchestra, right? That you're a conductor and you have to make sure each person is playing the part to make the symphony work well. And so maybe it's with the board or your volunteers or your staff or the funding or infrastructure. All of that takes a lot of coordination and the creativity that you have to come up with when things fall through. That a funding source fell through, and how are we going to fill that gap? Or here's a new need that has been, might for us, about 5-6 years ago, was work in trafficking and human trafficking. Huge issue. Affecting youth for sure. We weren't totally prepared for that, but we moved into that space, and it took a lot of creativity to think about, how are we going to fund that? How are we going to support that? What's going to take to make sure that we're having a holistic program for that? So the creativity, that's what really sparks me, is coming in and thinking about how to be creative around solutions and working within systems. And, if I need to disrupt something, how do I do that to make sure we get the best outcome? So, yeah.
So when you're talking about human trafficking with youth and you're talking about a holistic approach to that, tell me what some of the elements of that would be.
Sure. So identification, first off, making sure that we have things in place at different levels within the community, from domestic violence providers, from child protective, law enforcement, hospitals, other things that can help us with identification. Here are the risk factors. Here are some of the red flags, things you should be looking out for, and then bringing that to a more centralized location that we can process that, to understand what that might look like, and then getting it into the hands of, for us case managers, to start doing follow-up, to ask the right questions in a really trauma-informed approach to this, so that if there is a real issue there, we can act quickly in a coordinated way with those partners, and with a real strategic vision of how we're going to resolve this issue. Get the youth extracted from that situation if law enforcement needs to be involved. And then just really education training to the community, to any really resource that would listen, school districts, getting involved, making sure people are aware of what the issue is. But the holistic approach to case management is making sure that what you can provide for the youth or their family, if they're engaged with the family in that way, meets their need, and they don't have to find a way back to the trafficker to meet whatever their need might be. So very complex issues, might be mental health and other things involved with addiction or other things like that. But if we're doing our very best to meet the needs, then they may not have to feel like they got to revert back to the trafficker to get those needs met.
So I'm going to just say that's some dark stuff.
Very much so.
And there's a lot in your universe that is very sad. That's probably scary sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure not everybody meets Captain and, ends up going to college and,
Right.
having a beautiful house in the suburbs. I mean, you probably, I think you probably help everybody, and some come out better than others. So that can lead to burnout and frustration and hopelessness. How do you keep your spirits up?
Well, I probably have a different outlook on life sometimes than others. So I think I have a bit of a short-term memory with some of the pain and anguish and trauma that comes with us, because I do see a lot of hope, and I see a lot of different successes with different clients, or with programs, or with different collaboratives that work great together, and you hear how people have made their way through out of awful situations, and you see how they flourished under a different environment. And so you gain a lot of hope from that, which then reinforces that you're on the right track, you're in the right mission, always staying attuned to what might be, this risk factors for burnout. I really try to say that with our staff to make sure they're aware of that. Self-care as much as possible, making sure they take time for themselves. But again, it's, for me, if my battery's running low, I'm, equated to a cell phone, right? I just need to find a way to plug in and recharge. And, time with our staff, time with our volunteers, time with the clients, to hear the progress they're making, or, the different outlook they have now, a different future story they have now. It doesn't take long to plug in and get full charge. So.
I think that's so amazing, and I've heard it from other nonprofit leaders too. It's like the work burns you out, and it's the only way you're going to get recharged is by getting closer to the work.
Yeah,
and it's a little bit of an irony, but
delicate balance for sure.
I really think that is true, and for me, sometimes I forget to listen to the shows.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just hammering away, putting together a concert schedule, overseeing the staff, trying to bring some money in the door, get the word out, and I forget to come listen to the music, and that's the whole reason we're doing everything.
Yeah, one of the things we try a lot at Captain is share experience with each other, right? So one program might be having a real low day, but they hear success in another environment and see that it's possible, So I'll get through this bad day. I'll get through this bad week. But I know I have somebody else I can count on, and you can hear that shared success really helps lift everybody up.
Is that a formal, do you have a formal mechanism for sharing? How does that work in your organization?
Yeah, we have a little bit. So there's probably like 3 or 4 different ways we do it. But one of the main ones are our staff meetings. So we reserve time at staff meetings for people to share successes, outcomes, just those uplifting stories. And really highlighting the ones where we had more than one program working together. So showing the collaboration, show how they work together. We also give space on a lunch and learn, we call it. So we're doing that once a month. And some of the topics include burnout. Some of the topics include, those times that you feel when you internalize the success of a client based on them not reaching different things, knowing that's not you. It's a shared, journey with folks, and so really giving opportunities to share with each other, and then using our staff newsletter. I try to do that as much as possible, just to kind of share success stories, shout outs, different things that help energize and find reconnection to the mission or our beliefs.
To really understand that you're having an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is.
Even if that didn't work that day,
right.
Overall, there's a huge impact. That's wonderful.
And I think it's a level set for a lot of people too, to know success is it's a multifaceted. Our view of success shouldn't always fit one mold, right? So meeting clients where they're at, helping them move through the process for them at their speed really does show success in a lot of ways too. So if you have a cookie cutter model for success, that leads to some real frustration and burnout. So
yeah, and dampens creativity.
It does, right? Right.
One question that I've liked to ask in these discussions is just, so a lot of people in this town, this is a very privileged, very, very fortunate town. A lot of people never get close to homeless people, don't know anybody who's really struggling at the gas pump, for example, or, can't quite imagine what it would be like to not know where your next meal was coming from. And they look at people in that situation, and they might have certain assumptions that they make about people, about maybe their work ethic or their values. And I want to give you the chance to say something about the population that you serve that you wish the world understood.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. I think it's important to recognize that, yes, Saratoga County and Saratoga Springs in particular has this idea of affluence, and that's across, and everybody is benefiting from that. Well, then really is a segment of the population that is struggling. And I think that helping people understand that there's a report out there by United Way, it's called the ALICE, Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. Basically, people who are working but are unable to meet a household budget that meets their needs. So it takes into account poverty and another whole population of people who are really one paycheck away from real catastrophe, eviction, housing instability, some other kind of economic crisis, and maybe just a $200 bill that they just can't afford because they're paycheck to paycheck. For Saratoga County, that's 1 in 3. It's 33%. So having people understand that your person that you're in the room with, 1 out of 3 are probably struggling, and trying to, their best to make ends meet, but it's just either, situations exist in their life personally, systemically, whatever it might be.
Medical bills.
There's a lot to be said for people who split up and the income changes automatically, really radically. Deaths, divorce, other kinds of things like that. You can never tell what the income is for somebody just by looking at them. And there are those who, again, don't have those assets, don't have the resources. And they're going to need somebody that's going to be there for them. And hopefully they'll find their way to an organization within the nonprofit sector that can help for a little while to get them back on their feet. Yeah. But it takes the whole community to make sure we spread that word. And really, 90% of the people we work with are doing the best they can.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a story from the last year or 2 or 3 that it kind of pops out at you as something that kind of that reveals the impact of Captain?
Yeah.
Somebody who's been through your organization.
A lot to choose from. So it's part of that re-energizing, plugging back in. There's been so many stories. For sure during COVID, it really did highlight, I think, the fragile nature of households, and particularly those ones in the Alice population that are really just getting by. Well, that upended their lives in many, many ways. So we had people that were coming for the very first time to the emergency food pantry, never had to access services like that before, but they didn't know where they were going to find food. And so just seeing those folks come in, helping, being a part of their journey for a little period of time to help them get over that was very impactful for us and our staff. We really centered on that. And then also in the housing. I think one is we had a family of 7 not too long ago, 2 adults, 5 kids. And kids had some special needs, at least 2 of them did. And the father was fully employed, but COVID, the whole house got ill. So missed up to almost a month of work, no income. And that threw them completely off. They were just making it before, but to have a month without income, everything goes. So they were facing eviction, total disruption. Where do they go? How do they, pull kids out of school or other supports that they've already become comfortable with. So thankfully, we have a program that could help with that, take care of that rental debt and those arrears, make sure they were sustained, get back on their feet. Now they're back where they were before, not getting ahead as much as they would probably like, but they're still, safe in a stable housing. Kids weren't disrupted. So it's things like that. And there's, hundreds of other stories with youth and street outreach and other kinds of stuff. Senior citizens, we were doing a lot of work supporting them. That was a very fragile population in COVID. So making sure we were helping them, stay safe. So.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's just such a huge resource for our community, and I'm sure that the Capital Region would look very different without Captain. So thank you for holding so much in your hands and in your head and in your heart, and thanks for all the work that you do. Before we sign off, do you have any last words you want to throw in? Could be words of encouragement for your fellow directors, or it could be a question or anything like that.
Oh, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for the kind words. But it's an entire community, Everybody from our supporters, our staff, our volunteers, they're the ones holding up and doing that work, which is amazing. And I always I think that's what is so wonderful about Captain and so many other impact sector groups. There's so many good nonprofits doing work here. It's just we're sort of the nexus. We have an opportunity for people who are in need, people who want to help, and really committed individuals. So all the time, talent, treasure, all those things coming together, we can really make impact. And I think our community, Saratoga County, really has a strong collaborative approach. And I just encourage everybody to keep that great work going.
Great.
So, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy. It's
You're
been
welcome.
great getting to know more about you and more about Captain.
Thank you.
All
Thank you
right.
for this opportunity. It's
You
a
bet.
wonderful conversation.
All right.